Hi, everybody. Gosh,
There you go.
Judy.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Welcome. Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Diane.
Hi.
And Emma. Hello.
Hi.
Joanna. Hi there. There's another familiar face. Joanna and Lena. It's good to see you. Hi.
Hello. Hi, Susan.
Hello. We got Judy from Australia. It has to be just like stupid early there, Judy.
It's not too bad. It's 6 a.m.
Okay.
It's better than 1 a.m., Suzanne.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, my name is Joe Pena, and this is Enlighten Me. Discussions with people on a mission, perhaps like you, who have a commitment to your purpose and the courage to see it through. My guest today is Suzanne Spooner. Suzanne serves as a level 3 QHHT practitioner. She assisted Dolores Cannon and subsequently taught QHHT levels 1, 2, and 3 with Julia Cannon. And since 2012, she's helped many individuals tap into answers from within at her Des Moines, Iowa office. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Joe. It's great fun to be here with you. I'm happy to share some fun thoughts with you and the audience.
Yeah, I'm glad we have an audience, and that was something that came up. I didn't anticipate that we would, but the idea came up, and it just felt like the right thing to do. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Well, I'm not going to start with what is QHHT. I think anybody can find the answer at your website, Suzanne Spooner, QHHT.com, or at DoloresCannon.com. So we're going to move the conversation beyond that. Would like to direct it toward things that I think are rather curious to me and might be to someone else. Okay?
Sure.
So, okay, good. Maybe you can describe for me what it's like, what the experience is like for a client who has yet to ever experience a QHHT session with you. Mm-hmm. What's it like for them, like from the moment they step in the front door of your office until the moment they step out?
Wow, it's transformational. I think a lot actually happens from the moment they set the appointment to the time they step into the door. But if we're going to start from walking through my door, they're usually incredibly nervous, which is so normal. It's a new experience, so they don't know what to expect. So being nervous is something that you would anticipate having happen. They're worried about if they can do this, if they can let go and allow themselves to tap into this deep space of all-knowing. And so because of that, when they come in, we just sit and talk for a while and get to know one another. And I give them the tools that they need to help themselves to let go explore their amazing consciousness, finding all of the answers that have always been within them that our society is not good to teach us that we have access to and how to access that. So by the time we get done talking and we get them nice and comfortable on the table and begin the hypnosis, they're ready to go. And that's when the magic really begins. When they're sitting and talking with me before we start the hypnosis, and they're telling me about their life story, which every life story is absolutely amazing. They have so many questions of why did this happen to me? I'm a good person, but I had this growing up, or I had this in a relationship, or my jobs just don't work out. Or one of the all-time most common questions is, I feel like I'm meant to be doing something big, but I don't know what it is. So there's lots of questions in their head that their analytical left side just cannot come up with an answer for. And once we get into the session, that's where we start delving really deep to find these answers that are way beyond the scope of the left brain. That's over on the right side that we're focusing on at that point, the part of us that knows everything. So, all this information they gather in a session, we're recording the whole way through so that they have it to refer back to and use it as a really important tool after the session. But when I count them up at the end of the session, it's always just, it's so heartwarming because there's usually just wide eyes and, oh my gosh, what just happened? And we talk a lot about that for a while before they head out the door. But I joke, I don't think you can see here. Let me move this a little bit. I've got two windows by my door there. And I joke with my clients that I wish I could slide the windows open when they leave because I feel like their heads are this big walking out like, oh my gosh, what just happened here? And I feel so much better and I know so much more. It sounds really cliche, but I say, the you that walks in is not the you that walks out. It's a new version, and it's beautiful to facilitate. And I call myself the happy tour guide to help people find all this information within themselves.
Oh, that's pretty clever. Happy tour guide. I like that. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, this journey they're on is within themselves, just like you said. Before I continue, I'm curious if anybody is here who hasn't had a session yet, if you would mind just chiming in the chat and letting us know. Okay, so you gave us a description of what it's like for an individual to have an experience from the time they step in until the time they step out. So we know that experience from a client's perspective. Now, what I'd like to know, and I'm interested in, is what's it like from your perspective? What's it like when you engage that person when they walk in until the point where they walk out? What's it like for Suzanne?
Gosh, it's exciting. I don't have a lot of interaction usually with my clients from the time they make the appointment to the time they come in. It's usually just all done with emails, a few emails back and forth. Mm-hmm. So I'm always excited to see who walks in the door because I know that they're meant to be here and we're meant to be doing some really special big work that day. So when they walk in, I'm just excited to meet them, find out where they came from, and start sharing this experience. I get, how should I say this? I get very heart hooked into my clients as they start to tell me their story. I'm just an observer and listening very unconditionally to their concerns and their worries and their life story. But man, I am team them. And as they're telling me these things, there's things that I'm hanging on to that I know I want to help them address in the session to get the most helpful information for themselves to get onto their recording. So there's, I'm doing a bit as I'm listening, but I never know, as any QHHT practitioner, we never know where you guys are going to go, and so that's fun too. So once we get rolling into the session, there's a little story that's told that helps get them ready to go. And we start asking questions and they start answering, and we start to, pretty quickly get some ideas about where they're at. And, as a practitioner, even, after doing this for almost 10 years, when I ask that first question to begin the process for them, even I still hold my breath, like, oh gosh, please start saying something. say something, and as soon as they open their mouth, I'm like, yes, let's go. And we're off and running to the races. And, as we're going through the past lives or wherever they go, I'm always in my head referring back to what they have told me in their life story, thinking about their list of questions and watching how they describe things to pick up on little tiny things that they're saying that help me dive in deep for them to ask a question that explains something hopefully profound for them. So I'm just, I'm, kind of on the edge of my seat the whole time doing that, helping them. Sometimes the left brain will float back in a little bit, and I'm really good to recognize that. And I tell them, if you do that, I'm going to put my lasso on you and try to bring you back over to the right brain, but I can't make you. So you have to come willingly. And we talk a lot about that in the session, about their, what they need to do to help themselves stay in that right side of the brain. Usually we don't even have to do that though. Usually they're good to go. So, and the past lives or the future lives or the the more abstract experiences they go to are, to me, just incredibly fascinating. You just never know what they're going to be experiencing. And sometimes it's even, a past life, say, in a time of history that we're aware of, that we've thought we've learned about, but now we're seeing it from a perspective that isn't known about. Maybe, instead of the pharaoh, maybe it's the person who builds the pyramids or, helps out in the court. So you're seeing it from a different perspective. And then one of the funnest things is sometimes in those scenarios, we'll find out about history that truly happened. Dolores loved to say that history is usually written by the winner, so it's skewed. So we're getting like the real 411 here. And in that moment, it's a first person perspective. And so I love diving in and asking more questions about that. So those are the lifetimes. But then we make this easy transition over to that part of them that knows everything, subconscious, high self, whatever name they wish to put to that. And that's where the real fun begins. That's where I start asking the questions. They start answering from this deep, all-knowing part of themselves, which is them. We all carry it. We just, again, haven't been taught how to tap into it, typically. And so we just continue the session there by getting all of their questions answered. I love to ask questions based off of their answers to keep going deeper, 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 so that we're just loading their recording up with just infinite amounts of information on there for them. And, I have lots of fun in my sessions. I like to giggle a lot. I'm astounded when, even though I see it happen every time when the healing is occurring, I am just so curious about how we heal ourselves through what we call our high self or our subconscious. So I want to get all the information about that. It just blows my mind every single time. And when they get their, they came in, a bit of a victimhood is, it's a common human experience. But when we find from their high self the true reasons why they created that scenario, that issue, because we all have to admit that we create our own stuff. When we find out why they created it, what they've learned from it, what they, as their high self, though it's them, is doing to energetically completely repair it all, how they'll feel after the session, and what they need to do to maintain it. It's just such an amazing, perfect package of information that they give through themselves. It's not, it's not coming through somebody else's filter. It's just them, which is incredibly empowering. And I just love that. And, sometimes I'll, at the end of the session, if they're holding the energy well and we've answered all their questions, I can't think of any more questions. Oh my gosh, I will go into interview mode with the high self, because I'm much like Dolores. I want to know everything. And those conversations are astounding. I'm just so lucky to do what I do. And then I get to count them up and watch their eyes open up and go, holy smokes, what just happened? And we just laugh and have, some conversation about what they experienced and how they feel. And I love what I do. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Not at all. It really helps us to understand what it's like for Suzanne to experience this client's session with them, because there are two parties involved. I was wondering, how is it different for you today, X number of years later, than it was for you, say, when you first started out practicing?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Well, I didn't know what I didn't know first, so that was helpful. So I was just flying by the seat of my pants, trying, Julia Cannon likes to say there's lots of moving parts to this process. It's in one perspective, it's a very simplistic process. We're so lucky because Dolores worked decades to hone this process. And then she kind of just handed it to us in this little booklet. And we're like, is that it? Is that all there is? That's too simple. That's too easy. But we get the reward from all of her hard work. But at the very beginning, there's so many infinite situations that a client can have. And you can kind of have a general idea of what to do in this scenario and what to do in that scenario. But I mean, I still to this day, I learn from every single session I give, and I'm on, I have to think, oh my gosh, what do I do? And every once in a while, in a session, I mean, I just did it in my last one. I asked something and I went, don't ask that. That's not the question you want to ask, or you could have done this better. I'm always, monitoring myself when I'm helping them to go under to make sure I'm doing it the best that I can. And I don't do it every single time at all, but I catch myself. So I'm in a constant learning curve. Even after all of the sessions that I've given, I want to always be better than the last time. So I would say I have just more experience than I had when I was beginning. And I must have had more courage than I imagined at the very beginning, because I had no idea what I was getting into.
Well, now you mention it, and you've probably been asked this before, but what is it that actually prompted you to begin doing that to begin with? Was there something that just kind of blew you away about this woman, Dolores Cannon, when you heard her?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love, everybody has this, how Dolores happened to them story. So mine was like a gazillion other people. She popped up on my YouTube. I didn't click on her, but, all of a sudden I'm watching this lady that looks uncannily like my late Grandma Nettie. And I'm like, oh, there, gosh, she looks just like Grandma Nettie. And I start listening to her, but she's talking about ETs. And at that time, I think it was about 2010-ish or so, I wasn't quite into that yet. And I'm like, well, that's weird. But she looks like my grandma. She's like so trustworthy looking. That's interesting. And I clicked off. And then about 2 years later, I saw her give an interview, and she was talking about one of her Convoluted Universe books, which covered so many different types of topics in her sessions. And I thought, oh, wow, that I can relate to. And so I started looking her up on her website. Like everybody else, I signed up for a session. I wanted to have a session with the great Dolores. I think her wait list at that time was a couple years. And then I realized that she taught this. And at the time, I was doing mostly real estate. And I thought, I really kind of want to do this. I had already started expanding on my own metaphysical journey. I was channeling and teaching people how to channel, and that was great. And I think that's what inspired me about Dolores was like my channeling process, which is called the Art of Universal Knowing, or the acronym TAUK, talk. Her process was also teaching people that all answers lie within. And that just makes me thrilled. I don't want to be the source of information for anybody. I want to know my own answers. I want everybody to be able to tap in and get their own answers. So I think that's what resonated and got me excited. And so I signed up for her very first class after I found out that she taught. It was a few months away. And so I read some books and got more excited, went down to Arkansas and thought, what in the heck am I getting myself into? Because I've never done hypnosis before. So I thought I was like, kind of behind the eight ball there with no experience. Come to find out, she prefers that because those that had learned other types of hypnosis, she'd say, you have to kind of unlearn that. Don't mix the two. So I was kind of starting off on a fresh slate. And she was, oh my gosh, to sit in class with Dolores. Now, clear up until she passed and well after I was assisting her, if you would have asked me, even though I had spent lots of one-on-one time with her, I would have told you Dolores was like 6'3", because she's just iconic and she'd be up on stage, so you're kind of always looking up at her anyways. So she just had that big personality. And it wasn't until her very last class when I was walking with her I was bringing her down from her room down to the conference center to class, and we're chatting, and I just happened to look over at her, and I'm like, what? And I look again, we're the same height. So she's a little tiny like me. So she was just a doll, just truly a master at what she did. Okay, I don't even know if that answered your question, but there you go. That's where I went.
I don't know. Thanks for sharing that. I remember reading on your own site about how you had begun channeling, had established TAUK, the Art of Universal Knowing, and then you got involved with her. So I'm happy to hear you actually speak about it, in addition to how you wrote about it on your site. Look, earlier I asked if anybody here who joined us hadn't ever had a session. And Lena, I'm going to get to your question here in just a bit, but J.S. Marino says she hasn't, nor has Diane, nor has Lena. But Lena's an interesting situation where she says she's certified from a QHHT perspective, but hasn't had a session yet. So that's interesting.
That happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Martha hasn't had one. Joanna has not had one either. Lisa Fox says she had one booked, but it was canceled due to the lockdown, and she's anxious to rebook it as she's redoing her own practice. She's doing her own practice session, and she's gotten her level 2 QHHT. And, all this is very interesting to me, especially with the individuals who have their QHHT or in progress. I was under the impression that, like, if you're doing level 1, you're already probably going under through practice with somebody else. I guess not, huh?
Well, see that now, under normal circumstances, that's a probability. Before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of classes live, and one of the great benefits of doing the live classes was that we built in 2 days recently, 1 day back when I learned, of doing practice sessions. And that was phenomenal because we'd break off for a day, we'd be in groups of 3, and we'd take that whole day and practice giving a session, receiving a session, and observing a session, which was very, it really helped in the learning process. For the online students that hadn't, obviously isn't available because they're doing it at home on their own time, but we always encourage everybody that takes the class to make sure they reach out to a practitioner and get their own session, because not only do we want them to understand what it's like from the client's perspective, we want them to get their healing and get their questions answered. So we hope that all practitioners, as soon as they can, get their own session.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions that I have here right now, and then I'm going to turn our discussion to the various series that I'd like to cover with you, series that you've done. Okay? Lena asks, how can we scientifically explain to skeptical people how the right brain is connected to infinite knowledge?
You have to think about this. Our left side of our brain is our analytical mind, our number cruncher, our organizer. We have to have those parts to us to have a human experience. It's just that on the left side of our brain is where we'll entertain the concept of fear or worry. A, never helpful. B, super not helpful on the day of a session. So that's what we're doing in a session, is trying to give you guys the tools to manage that left side of your brain, because we want to focus on this amazing, beautiful right side of your brain. This is where we get all of our creativity from, our imagination. When we talk about epiphanies, aha, our gut, our intuition, all of that is coming in from our right side of the brain. Now, interestingly, I bet all of us can think back to our childhood where we were told repetitively, it's just your imagination, you're just making it up. We devalued that right side of the brain. But that's everything. That's all of our ways of creating and tapping into this part of us that knows everything. I mean, I won't get into the shadiness of that, but there's a reason why we were meant to, taught to focus on the left side and not the right. So scientifically, I don't know if you can go there because it's not scientific. I mean, I guess there's elements to it that can be explained scientifically, but you almost have to just let go of that and just know and trust that this right side of your brain knows how to give you all answers. And here's the example that I like to give during sessions, because everybody can relate to this. We do tap into that right side of our brain without even trying. We do it many times throughout our life. We just, again, haven't been taught that, oh my gosh, I just tapped into my high self. Wasn't that amazing? Wasn't that good information? But when it happens, it's like this. You'll be having a conversation with somebody you really care about, and they're having a really, really hard time. And gosh, you want to offer them support. You want to give them advice, but heck, you don't even know what to say to them. But all of a sudden, you find that your mouth is opened up and this golden blah, 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 blah is coming through. And holy heck, it is really good information. It makes you even wonder where in the world it's coming from, but it's so good. So you just keep going with it, and you'll stop and your friend will go, whoa, that was exactly what I needed to hear. How'd you know that? And you'll go, I don't know. And they'll say, can you repeat that? And you go, no. But gosh, that was good. And so in that moment, what you did without even trying is that you quieted down the analytical left side of your brain to freely speak the stream of thought coming in from the right. What we call the high self subconscious. It's just a title. But when you did that, you gave pure, true information. You weren't analyzing, stopping, and thinking about it. You just let the information come through. And I don't know how you I'm not a scientific person, so I don't know how you do that. I mean, I'm sure, you put sensors on the brain, like they do with the monks that are chanting, and see, where you're at with that. But I just know that everybody carries this. And if they want to tap into it, and if they know the tools to help quiet down the left side, it's available to everyone.
And yeah, I think so many of us can relate to that, having had the experience of getting out of our own way and speaking something. And the part that really I resonated with was someone asking, can you repeat that? No.
No.
All right. I thought I had more questions, but I didn't. Anyway, Lena, I understand now why you didn't have a session. You say that you did your certification online for level 1. I think you might have meant level 1. Anyway, Lena says thank you for responding to that.
Yeah. Good luck, Lena.
Karen, that's who I missed. Karen, you mentioned that you hadn't had one. Now, Diane asks something that is a perfect segue to what I'm about to discuss now. Thank you for that, Diane. You have 2 series on playlists. One of the series is the event series that you've done with Ron Head, and the other is the designer series, which I think is a cool name, with Beverly Ricard. Okay, so let's speak about the one with Ron for a moment. Now, you have number 5, 6, and 7 up on your YouTube channel. I don't recall what you said where the others were. I think you might have said we would have to look for them elsewhere, but 5, 6, and 7 are up on your current YouTube channel. When did you do your first session with Ron, and when are you going to do another one?
Oh, okay. Both good questions. Okay, the other ones are on my very first YouTube channel before I had somebody nice like you to help me out with it. And it's Infinity Healers, I believe is the name of the channel. But if you just search Suzanne Spooner, Ron Head, or the event, they should all pop up. I think I'll have to double check that.
Okay, we'll get them up there.
Okay, so Ron, oh my gosh, Ron is such an amazing guy. I just adore him. So many, many years ago, it must have been around 2012, 2013, I had just learned QHHT. I had a group on Facebook for my channeling class talk, and Ron had taken that class, and we had just become friends on Facebook. He lived in Miami at the time. I was in Iowa. And he reached out to me and he wanted to have a QHHT session. And I said, sorry, you're going to have to come up from Miami to have one with me. And I don't think he could do that at the time. And we just, kept talking about other things. And then my husband and I decided to vacation down in by Tampa. And so I messaged Ron and said, hey, we're going to be in Tampa. We're renting a house. We have a spare bedroom. Do you want to come up and I can give you a session and you can spend the night and then go home? It's about a 5-hour drive, I think. And he said, sure. And then I told my husband, and he was like, Suzanne, we don't invite Facebook friends to come stay with us on vacation. I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, he looks like Santa Claus. I think it's all fine and good. It's so funny. Oh my gosh, my poor husband. But there he came. He's so sweet, and he was awesome. He and my husband got along great, and we did a session that day. And again, you don't know where anything is going to lead to. You just go for it. And so Ron had these amazing other lifetimes. And then when I called in his high self, there was just something different about it. I don't know how to say this, a little higher vibrational even than a typical high self. And, that session is out there. We'll find it and we'll put it back. I think it's on that Infinity Healer session. A very sweet man named Dennis Mochtman, way back in the day, a good friend, created that video clip for us, and it's beautiful to this day. So we'll find that very first one. But it was, when I think I finally asked, who is this speaking? And he says, well, this is the creator. And that was my first time of having that happen in a session. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And, it was a beautiful session. So in the session, one of his questions was something about, should he move, or, he's thinking about moving. And so we're talking about, the creator and I are talking about that in a session. And he says, yes, he needs to be by tall trees. And I can't remember what else he said. And I was just, just thinking in my head, well, this conversation was going, and I said out loud, I said, well, Des Moines has tall trees. And I think we just laughed about it. And then about 2 months later, Ron moved to Des Moines. So, so we had the opportunity to do a lot of sessions, and my schedule wasn't as busy as it is now. So I could get him in pretty quickly. And so, oh my gosh, I think we did over 20 sessions. And most of those, I think we put out. We had a website, which I don't think we maintain that well anymore, called Speaking with Self. And we put the recordings up on there. But from those sessions, he started talking about the event. And I'm going to give this one to Ron. I don't think at that time anybody had said the words "the event." I really think he might have been one of the first ones to classify that. And it's no big deal if so or if not. It's just, that's something that sticks in my head. And then we started that series. I don't even think we planned every one of them. It's just, if that information came up in one of the sessions, then we would do that. But the last few, probably the ones that are on my current YouTube channel, those were specifically intentioned to be event updates. And yes, we do need to do another one. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't put that out within the next couple of months.
I know that's going to be pretty highly looked for and received at that. That's such a popular topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next series, that's something that just came up over the last 7 or 8 months, and you've already got 3 sessions along with an interview to go along with it, is called the Designer Series.
Yeah.
And we also happen to have the person that you did these sessions with joining us today. Beverly, I just unmuted your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure can. There you are. Hi, welcome, Beverly. Welcome.
Hi.
Everyone who may or may not be familiar with Beverly, she and Suzanne teamed together and did the Designer Series, not originally intending for them to become the Designer Series, but only that they became that after the fact. So I'm going to turn this over to the two of you, and perhaps you two can address something about perhaps revisit with us how it got started, and then just walk the journey with us a little bit, and let's all have some fun listening in. Over to you.
Okay.
All right. Well, hey Beverly, it's good to see you. Okay. When Beverly happened to me, that's another one. That's another fun story. So Beverly is just like all of my clients. She reached out. She wanted to have a session. we set it up. She came in, we get going, she's just so sweet. And, as she told me her life story, it was a big one. I'd like to tell everybody I've heard everything, and I think I have at this point, but she had a lot that she had to work through, from her childhood and up to, her adulthood. And, so we had a bit to work on. And, okay, I just have to say this because as for the practitioners, it was so sweet and so humbly meant. And this is where my heart was already hooked into Beverly before this, when she said this. But when I asked her to tell me her life story, she just looked at me so completely sincerely and said, "Do you want me to tell you the truth?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that would be most helpful." But she was, because there's been so much that's happened to her, she was so careful for me, which isn't necessary. But that I just loved her from the get-go. So then we start in on her past life in that first session, and holy heck, it's like, it's like you can see this as a movie playing out. This very sweet gal that's born into a prosperous family and has a true love that isn't of the ranking that, needs to be at that time in order for her to be with him. And she's signing documents that are affecting nations. And it's amazing. It was, just that past life alone was just jaw dropping and amazing. But then we go, I bring in her high self, and something happens that does happen in sessions, not often, but it happens, where her voice started to go very mechanical, very staccato talking, which is not a weird thing at all when you understand what's happening. It's, sometimes that part of us that knows everything that's going to come through, it always has its own vibration and frequency and tone. And sometimes that's how it comes through. There's a few of my recordings, I think, on my channel that demonstrate this. So anyways, once that voice started coming in, I'm like, okay, buckle up. We're going for it. We're going to have a really interesting session. And then she starts downloading. She starts giving out all this information from this really high perspective that we don't find out until a bit later in that part of the session, that this part of herself that's coming through calls itself the designer of the reality simulations. And she's talking about herself as the designer and these engineers and how they work together to create our reality. And what we're doing and how they view us, because they view us not as people with bodies, but test tubes. And it was, my head was trying to keep up. I'm trying to ask questions, and I'm trying to understand what this level of information that she's giving, it was a little much for my brain. I did my best that I could. But so that was our first session. And we're like, whoa, that was cool. And Beverly's like, what just happened? And Beverly, maybe you can share from your perspective what that was all like.
Well, it was, where do I even begin? I went into the hypnosis session just really open. I had zero expectations, like zero. And I don't know if that's how it happened, or like the whole process of me getting to your office and the whole thing. But wow, I was just so open. And when you asked me to share my life, yeah, I completely was like, are you for real right now? Wasn't expecting that at all. I never knew I would have to share like such deep, profound things. My whole life has been about everybody around me and healing them and helping them. And I really kind of put all of that on the back burner, and I just see it as an experience. Like, yeah, going through it was hard, but it was just an experience. And that's kind of how I saw my life. And so for somebody to go sit me down and go, what happened to you? And I'm like, what? You mean we're not going to talk about you? And so that was interesting. So then I did have to ask you, like, do you want the truth? You know, because it's unbelievable. Most people don't get to have this crazy life that I had. And I was kind of like hiding it from the whole world because it was so weird. It was completely weird and unexplainable. My whole life was unexplainable and it was very weird. And parts of it were very dark. And so to come forward and like openly, finally at the age of, gosh, was I 35 or 36? It was last year. So probably 35. Finally sit down and tell somebody almost from beginning to end in a condensed version, my life. And I have to be completely honest with you, Suzanne, because there's other practitioners here, obviously listening. You did not make a face. You did not show any emotion. You were like the perfect parent that listens to the child without any reaction. And I would say something that would be completely shocking to anybody. And you just sat there calm and in peace. And I was like, okay, she's okay. So I can keep going. And I really just have to stress that to other people going into this, like how big of an impact that was to be able to not have the reactions happening from the other person, and how loving it felt in the room. It just felt like it's okay. Just share it and everything's okay. You're in a place of love and peace here. And that's how you made it feel. It was very, very important for this whole process. Otherwise, I might not have been able to bring the full part of me through in the hypnosis. You know, that guard would have been up at some point in the subconscious. I would really think that. And, we get done and you're smiling. I mean, you're just like, oh, this is going to be so great. And I look at you and I just look at you and I'm like, I just pretty much explained how the whole world blew up and around me. And you're like telling me how great it's going to be. And I needed that because I was just like, okay, where do we go from here? And then we did our small break, to make sure everybody's ready for the next stage in the process. And it was so beautifully done and perfect. And how important is it for everybody to understand how to create that environment with another human being? That was the very beginning of the process started right there. Because if at all I did not feel loved or accepted or cared for, it would have, I don't know if it would have been allowed to come through. I just felt very like it was a sacred space.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we did our session, which is really interesting because you had told me before we started, most people remember when they come out, their sessions, and that's okay. And I was like, all right, awesome. Well, when I came out of mine, I was just kind of like, I had like little bits and pieces. And I was just like, how is this possible? And you're like, do you know what happened? And I'm like, no. And then you played back to me. Here I am. I'm in a daze, by the way, everybody. Like when you go under and you do this process coming back, I couldn't integrate back into reality very fast at all. It's like Joe said, you're kind of like trying to come to. And I'm laying there and you play me back a clip of my robotic voice. And I was so embarrassed.
Oh, wait.
I was so embarrassed, Suzanne. And I'm laying there and I'm like, that is not me.
And I'm going, yay, you did it.
Yeah, you're all excited. And I'm like freaking out. I have no idea how that came out of me. I don't know what it means. I'm like, no idea this is going on. And then I realized that Dolores was in the room with us still. For everybody that didn't get to know a whole lot of my past, I've seen ghosts and spirits and the other world like my whole life. And it's a huge part of me that I hid because it's, it's taboo and it's scary for people and not very accepting. And you're the weird kid who stays at someone's house and you tell them, hey, you got this thing in your house. No, you can't do that. And so here I am in a daze, and she played this weird sounding voice back to me. And I'm just like kind of weird. And I look over at this painting on your wall, and I'm just kind of looking at the trees. And then I can feel Dolores standing in the room with us. And I'm like, she never left. She stayed the whole time. And before this session, she had kind of like tried to show up to me before I was even going to come. I didn't even know if I was going to come. I had like some crazy life things going on. And it just like happened to where I forced myself to kind of go. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm just really, really glad that I did. But for her to still be in the room, and then I kind of like, and I'm feeling her and I'm in this daze, I start giggling and I'm like, Suzanne, I have to tell you something. And it's because, you already allowed that space and you kind of know a little bit about my past. And I'm like, Dolores is here with us, and I had to share that with you. And it was just amazing. It was just amazing. Coming out of hypnosis sessions, you feel like you're floating because you're not really back yet. Like, that's how I feel. And it takes me a while to get hungry, maybe an hour or two. But then, boy, once I'm hungry, I am starving. I mean, just starving. And so that was our first session. It was bizarre. Oh, and I did finally listen to what happened. And I was just sitting there in shock. And I'm like, scratching my head going, did this really happen? How's it possible? What is going on? Is this real? Is this real? And I was with my friend, and my friend was looking everything up, and we're listening to it. And she's like, oh my gosh, I found out who you are. And I'm just sitting here trying to like, whoa, hold on a minute. I just hold on a second. I don't know what's happening right now. I don't understand any of this. Like, okay, is the past life real? You're finding evidence on the internet and you're showing it to me, and we're still listening to this. And as we keep listening, and then the robotic voice starts talking after the past life. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I'm like, that is not me. I'm like, I have never talked that way in my whole life. How is that even possible? Like, I'm in shock and I'm embarrassed because now my friend's hearing it, right? And I have no idea how she's going to perceive this. So here, coming out of the spiritual closet, boom, here you go. And I'm just sitting there with her, and I'm like, did you just hear what was said? Like, and I'm not even admitting that I'm saying any of this, because I'm like, that's not me. And it was so much information. I mean, every sentence had so much energy behind it and so much information. And I find that with every session that we do, that there's just an overwhelming amount of information that comes through. And
well, I think that was one of the cool things, Beverly, that you started. I think it was that I'm going to take my things out.
You okay?
Yeah.
They're dying, so I'm going to take them out. So one of the things that happened with Beverly is the day after her session, she starts texting and calling me and saying, I'm getting more information. And we're talking about her session. She goes, you were there with me. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was sitting next to you. And she's like, no, you were there with me. And I'm like, no, Beverly, I was sitting beside you. I wasn't in it with you. But her concept was that I was there with her, that was mind blowing.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing these practitioners need to know. Wow. When I was down seeing the cylinders and the molecules it was nothing. There was no energy, there's no feeling. And for everybody else, that's really big for me as a human being, because I live every day feeling everything in every moment, from people, from places to, I feel and I take in everything. So for them to drop me down into this, it's pitch black, but it's not scary, but there's no feeling. This
is when you were experiencing the
cylinders.
Was that right?
Yeah. And I'm
just give a brief description, Beverly, of that scenario. So if in case somebody hasn't listened to that.
Oh yeah. So here I am, and I'm dropped down into this like mass area that there's no energy, there's no good, there's no bad, there's no feeling. I'm not feeling anything. I'm not picking up anything. Nothing's good. Nothing's bad. Nothing's nothing. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know where I am, but I'm not afraid. And I look over and there's nothing there. But then all of a sudden this cylinder appears. And I was like, okay. And then they make it disappear again. They're kind of trying to show me like, these exist here, but you cannot see them. And they look like a cylinder shape, and they are like see-through, and there's all these tiny little balls of vibrating light floating around in them. And there's this, I'm guessing it's a person's soul hanging out in the bottom of the cylinder, with all of these vibrations going on in the cylinders. And they're like, okay, take that in, because they're giving it to me in pieces. And while all this is going on, the designer's like in my body giving you guys messages. And I was like, okay. And then I'm watching and I'm watching and I'm watching, and I'm trying to like comprehend and understand what they're showing me. And then they make it go away, and then they bring it back, and then they show, hey, there's other ones. It's not just this one cylinder, but we can't show them all to you because it'd be too overwhelming for your brain, is what they kept saying. We're only going to give you pieces because it's too overwhelming for your brain. And I was like, okay. And then I look again, and there's these, I don't know how to explain exactly what they look like, but they look like kind of like triangles, but they are beings. I can't see their faces, and I can't see hands or arms, but I can tell they're beings. And I know that they have this tool, because I see one of them above one of the cylinders take out a tool, and he is extracting some of the vibrational, molecules. That's the biggest label I could put to what I'm seeing to help people understand what it was. And they are implementing. So I get to watch them put one in, and then I'm watching them take stuff out. And they're explaining to me how in the bottom of the cylinder, our soul, it's actually attached to our emotions, and the emotions create vibrations in the molecules that are in the cylinders, which is what we see in our everyday life. And I was like, whoa, I could have swore, Suzanne, because you're in that room with me and you're talking me through all of this. I'm like, oh, okay, Suzanne's seen this before. It's not a big deal to her. That's really what I thought, like in my head, because I don't know. I've never had this process before. And the next day I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, what if she didn't see any of that? Like, what if she didn't? And
this is when QHHT practitioners wish we had goggles where we could see what you are seeing.
Yeah, it was just bizarre. And then finally I'm getting that push because I get messages, connected to whoever tells me things, my whole life. And they're like doing that pushy thing when they really want me to say something to somebody and they're not dropping it. I mean, they're just like really getting adamant. And I'm like, Suzanne, there was a lot that happened. And I think I was misperceived that I thought you saw all this. And I need to tell you what I saw. And so you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll have a phone call, because it was a lot to like try to put all that through text. And eventually we had a phone call and you were like, whoa. And I said, yeah, I don't quite understand how all of this is connected. And I did see the collective molecules floating like a current above all of the cylinders that they would show me as well. And that's kind of how it's all connected. But I just didn't realize that you hadn't seen it before. I thought, oh, this is QHHT, and she's a level 3, and she's definitely come across this like a million times. And so she knows exactly what I'm seeing when I'm in this weird voice.
And all this time you're talking, the designer's doing her robotic explain.
Yes.
And I'm only trying to keep up with understanding what she's saying, so.
And it's really weird. So like especially the last time, I can feel, because I'm dropped down there when she comes in, which is totally fine because it's just like a safe space. But I can still feel this last time how connected I still was to my body, but not connected. And I could feel her flipping through my brain like a Rolodex. I mean, searching for words to use. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I need to go read a dictionary to give this being more input to use when she's trying to communicate this other dimensional stuff into our terms, into our, what we're doing. It's just, wow.
That actually comes up pretty often in sessions where when you're talking to that part of whatever part comes through that knows everything, sometimes it's like you can see they're scanning and the eyes are going back and forth. And they'll say searching for the earth word. They won't even say English or, the language, searching for the earth word. And they'll go, oh, your language is so limited. And it's like, they have to work with what we've got. And so a lot of times they'll do analogy, and I think you did that as well. You had to in order to get forth the information. So, yeah.
Hey, Beverly, I have a question for you. You mentioned something, early on, you mentioned something along the lines of the hypnosis. Had you ever, prior to this session with Suzanne, ever meditated or experienced hypnosis before?
No.
Oh.
I have since joined a meditation group to try to help myself integrate the energy better if we do a session.
Okay, aside from your purpose for wanting to do that in terms of the meditation, are you experiencing anything notable from your meditation practice so far?
Oh, yeah.
If you are having challenges with some of the things that you were exposed to just by virtue of being who you are and experiencing life the way you do, are you interacting with that differently? Perhaps less emotion, less reaction, more acceptance, more understanding?
To be honest, I feel that I question everything more since the experience. And I used to not question things at all. And it's because people that know me understand that I really have a hard time coming into situations with my ego. And so for something to be put kind of on a so-called like pedestal, if that makes sense, And it's not like a pedestal, but some people might perceive it that way. And then for me to like think of it in a, wow, you know, like this is who I am way, is really hard for me to accept, because I really am detached from that part of myself that is like wanting to see any form of greatness from me. And in fact, all of this, and I tell people all the time, it's just, I'm a conduit for the divine to come through and help people. And that's it. It's not me as a person or a human being. So for me to have a past life and everyone's like, oh, that's who you were, I'm just kind of like, I shy away from all of it, truthfully and honestly. And so I'm actually integrating and healing through this process and trying to learn to accept these past lives. And through the meditations, I find myself when I'm in doubt, you know, like, oh, that it just couldn't possibly be true. You know, I can't just fully just accept that this is who I was, you know, and that's hard for me. And when I doubt it, there's something significant that shows up in my reality. Just like, aha, you thought you were going to doubt it and you can't now. And I just actually, this is really interesting. On Tuesday, I did a huge shamanic breath work meditation. So, which I'd never done before. It's my first time. And there's a disclaimer with it. So I was really kind of like scared in a way. Had no idea what was going to come through or happen. But, you know, they say it brings up a lot of your past trauma and you will cry, and you need to create like a little pod on the ground and allow yourself to be able to roll around if you need to, or move and cry out your situation. And I was like, okay, all right, so I'm ready to process. You know, I'm like, I've really built up for this moment. And I go into this deep breathing and none of that happened. I was like, I had the most incredible experience. I mean, I kick off and I'm talking to God. I mean, I know people might think that's weird, but here I am thinking, all right, we're going to process, we're going to heal. And God shows up, and not like in a physical form, but I'm laying there and I know it's him because I've talked with him many times, all day long sometimes. And I know that feeling, you know, very well. And so he's like, okay, I just want you to know we're going to be upgrading. And he's like walking me through this process. And then these beings show up, and I'm having this huge like thing happen. And at first I was like, I don't know if I should be afraid of what's happening right now. And he's like, do not fear. This is, you tell people not to fear. Don't fear. Just breathe through and allow this process. And I'm like, okay. So he didn't leave when these beings showed up. So, and he's telling me it's okay. So then I relaxed and I kept going. And this went on. It's like a 2.5 hour long process, but it really was huge for me. Okay. And a lot of amazing things happened. And I come out of it and I'm just like, I didn't cry. I didn't have my childhood stuff come up, you know, like, but okay, you know, and it was like a very spiritual process with different visions that happen. So then where it gets interesting is you ask me, you know, have you meditated? No, not up until just recently after the hypnosis sessions. I thought, well, you know, this is a lot of energy. When I come out of these, I'm really out of it. And I don't remember, and I want to remember, and I want to feel different. And I want to be able to integrate this energy different. So that's when I started seeking meditation. And so that might surprise like a lot of people, but here I am in this meditation and this crazy stuff happens. And I'm just like, okay, that was interesting. So then the next day, after it happens, I start getting signs and symbols trying to prove to me that my experience that I just had happened. Because I have to heal the skeptical part of myself now. That's part of my healing journey, is to allow myself to fully embrace and walk with, I guess, who I am. Because I'm okay with other people and their walk and where they are in all moments. But for me to fully embrace who I am as a person is very difficult. And that's the walk we're on right now, is embracing who I am and the spiritual journey.
When you said you received signs and symbols, were these things that came up in your mind's eye, or were they things that showed up in your physical life, like time or words that showed up, or perhaps license plates or things people said? How did that show up?
Physical.
Okay.
Absolutely physical. And at first I'm just like, yeah, it happened once, no big deal. But when it happens like 5 times,
right.
In a matter of a few hours, and then that voice comes in that tells me things to help people, because that's what I have done, without even realizing that's what I've done, but that's what I've done. They were like really pushing. They were like, look this up, like that. Look it up. And I'm like, okay, I will. Just give me a minute. And then boom, it happened again. And they're like, look it up. So I'm like, okay. So I looked it up, and it was just, I was in shock, right? Because I'm like, okay, yeah, it'll be a spiritual thing, and I'll read it, and then I'll integrate it into the reality and work with it. But what I read was so much deeper and so much what I was not expecting, and how it was tied to the last hypnosis session and the shamanic deep meditation breath work that I just did. And it ties into the future things that are going to be taking place as well. So it's just, yeah, it's been profound, because now they're working with me and making myself a focal point while I am still helping others. I don't mind like putting myself, on the back seat and letting everybody else drive. That doesn't bother me at all. So.
Okay. You've raised I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of questions for you, Beverly. And I know that I can get in contact with you through Suzanne.
Yeah.
In some fashion. Now, Suzanne, have you two, I know you have an announcement to make, and I don't think we're quite ready to speak about that just yet, but do you have any other plans, the two of you have any other plans, Suzanne, for continuing the series?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Beverly just has so much information to share, and it's actually we've become great friends, friends from lifetime. So we look for any opportunity to get together and explore her amazing consciousness and laugh and just do friend things. But yeah, we're in the first part of April, we'll be getting back together again.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Because so many profound things come from the discussions that you have with Beverly. So Beverly, from that perspective, I really appreciate your willingness to continue on with this series. Even though, like I said before, it wasn't intended to be a series, but look where we are now. Not quite a year later, yet something that clearly is leading somewhere with so much to be offered. Okay, now with that said, Suzanne, I just would like to point something out that I felt came up as I was listening to Beverly. And it goes like this. What Beverly is experiencing is truly profound in a fabulous way. And yet, I imagine this is something that occurs only out of a small percentage of the many sessions that you've had over time. And yet, by the same token, each individual who has had sessions has had a level of profundity they've experienced for themselves that hasn't quite, you could say, match a level of experience that Beverly has had from the standpoint of a broader perspective, yet no less impactful on their individual life and life-changing. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's hard to know how each person perceives their session. That's such an individual experience. So I can just tell you what I see, while I'm with them, and sometimes we'll have contact afterwards, and I get updates. I would say it's hard to compare one session to another in that capacity. They all are profound for their own reasons. And then, Beverly has been so open to, after the initial of how can this have happened, to, really accept it and keep working deeper. That's really what our hope is with all of our clients, is that they can accept the information that they gave themselves and keep delving deeper within their own consciousness. And I do think that happens in most cases. Sometimes I'm sure, it's a lot to take in, and their left brain will kick in, usually not even before they've left my building, saying, I think I just made that up. I don't think I was under, that was weird. And, maybe the left brain wins out and kind of dismisses everything as just an interesting day. But yet it happened. And so even for those folks, the opportunity to hit that deep, profound understanding of what happened in their session is always available to them, because it's always with them, through the recording or through their memory. So maybe, 10 years down the road is when it is really supposed to hit and make sense to them. It's not always as instantaneously as it was for Beverly, but I do think that happens a lot. And I think, I don't know, that, Beverly is just such I've had many clients through the years who I've done multiple sessions with. I've got one right here that's on with us today, but it's, everybody has their own journey with it too. And, when you find the one that you're going to keep doing more sessions with, because of, what is uncovered in their session, to me, that just is a gift in a different way, because I can keep diving deeper and getting more information and helping them understand more. And I learned from every session, but I love to do the deep dives. And I'm very willing to do that. So, I just think it's profound for everyone. They are the ones that determine how deep they take the experience and run with it. I was just, Beverly's just like a little jackpot. She just really goes for it.
So just before we wrap up here, I know, Suzanne, that you and Beverly have something that you're going to be doing together in the near future. So I thought I would save it for last. And by the way, I did look for Ruben throughout this conversation, didn't find him.
Okay, no worries.
And so with that said, what is this that you'd like to share with us?
Okay, well, so we have this really cool opportunity that came up. We're so excited about it. After Beverly's first session, I received an email from a gentleman named Ruben Langdon. You may know him. He has a TV show on Gaia TV right now called Interviews with Ed, or ED, Extra Dimensionals. And a friend of his had forwarded Beverly's session to him, and he had listened and was really interested in that session. So a conversation began, and he will be here in Des Moines. Beverly's coming back the first week of April, and we're going to film an episode for his TV show, which will be a lot of fun. And Beverly's she's so cool. She's going to let us just play with her. So I'll be putting her under, and we'll be accessing the designer, and Ruben is going to be there as well. And we're going to let him ask questions. So this is going to be interesting. That doesn't usually happen. So that'll be great. On top of that, Ruben is bringing with him, he's traveling across the country doing interviews for a show. And he's bringing a gentleman with him named Bill Homan, who is the protector or the caretaker of the crystal skull, the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull. So the skull will be with us. And I'm going to give him a session as well. And we're going to dive into deep understanding about his connection with the crystal skull. So yeah, it's very exciting, and it's coming to fruition the first week of April.
I wonder what the designer might have to say about the crystal skull.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just such a bonus. I don't actually know anything about it. I still have to do research, Suzanne. But I'm so excited because I've been told it has this astronomical energy that we're not going to be able, it's going to be just like this glowing thing that is just going to like light things up. And I'm so excited. And just, I don't know. That's what I've been told is it really is. It's going to be a beautiful thing to experience. And I'm very like grateful and excited. I'm very grateful. I couldn't have guessed that anything like that would have ever happened. Just, it's exciting.
If I understand correctly, the way Gaia schedules her shows, you might do your shoot in early April. Find out from Ruben when it might actually air, because it could be months. It could be a few months.
Yeah, it could definitely be a few months. And and I would assume, it's obviously going to be on Gaia. I don't know if it'll be in other places as well. But we'll find all of that out. We need to go on the journey first, and we'll get that all squared away.
And with that said, maybe you'll have some other sessions too together. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Beverly, I want to say thanks for joining us. Appreciate that you showed up. It's funny because Suzanne reached out to me this morning and thought, you think it might be a good idea to have Beverly join us? And I thought the exact same thing. I mentioned that to Suzanne, and we had a laugh about it, and boom, here you are.
Can I share some gratitude when you're done, Suzanne?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just saying the funny circumstance of that was this morning I was thinking like, gosh, it'd be really fun to have Bev on. And, and I'm thinking that I don't have to talk so much, that we can have people talking. But I was thinking, gosh, it'd really be nice to have Beverly on. And so I started texting Beverly and saying, hey, I bet you're busy today, but, we got this going on, and would you like to be a part of it? And then I stopped mid-text. I thought, oh, wait, this isn't my show. I have to go ask Joe first, what he wants to do. So I stopped texting Beverly. I texted Joe. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about, what do you think about having Beverly on too?
And clearly he says, I had a real problem with it.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you're like, I was just thinking that. I'm like, sweet. So
Joe, you're so funny.
No coincidences, right?
That's right.
No.
All right, Beverly, you said you had something to say?
Yes. So yesterday morning, for the first time in all of these hypnosis sessions, I really want to tell everybody, I haven't read any of the comments, and I haven't listened to the YouTube videos that you beautifully produced. And that's mostly because I don't want my ego to at all walk into any of this. And so that's a really personal choice for me. So I stay out of it, and I allow the natural process to happen without any of these external thoughts that could pop in or out, by wanting to see what people say or think or any of that. And, like I told you, I shared that I went through this experience and there was things happening. And Suzanne kind of said, you should really look at some of the comments. I mean, they're being very well received. And the inside of me, it was just like, I don't need to look at them. That's okay. I'm okay with like where I'm at and who I am, and it's good. And then I thought, you know what? Suzanne knows you pretty good. And if she's kind of making a recommendation, like I took that into my heart space, and I told my partner, John, the night before, I said, Suzanne kind of mentioned this, and he goes, oh, okay. I wake up the next morning and we're sitting there having coffee. And he goes, just so you know, I read all of the comments. And I said, what? Really? And he goes, yeah, it's okay. He goes, I just want to read you some of them. And so I'm sitting there having coffee with him. And he starts reading these things to me. You guys, for the first time in my spiritual life that I run and hide from, deeply run and hide from, I realized that I've reached people and in their heart space. And I cried unconditionally with feeling love and acceptance, like for the first time in my life, over being the weird kid, or the weird person, or, the one sitting in the corner that has all these things going on, but can't share any of it. And it was really, 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 really big for me. And I just really, really, really want people to understand like how grateful that felt for me. Not being accepted in this way for so long, and hearing comments of people with their love and their gratitude and their acceptance. And I really just needed to share how grateful I was for that experience. And I really needed to say that out loud, Joe.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for all of the work you do. You have no idea. I send you love all the time. All the time.
Thank you so much for that, Beverly.
Of course, Suzanne too. Yes, Suzanne, like almost daily.
Right back at you.
All right. Suzanne Spooner, Beverly Ricard, thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. So nice meeting you.
And then Beverly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Love
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
made my day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll see you soon. And
All right.
look for this on my YouTube channel and on Suzanne's. Suzanne's, it'll be maybe about a week or so. In mine, it'll be a few days. But thanks again for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great.